Today we are going to speak about web design and specifically about designing a page or a website so that it is effective for your users to use. And there's a couple aspects of web design, and I think it's important to talk about them sort of separately before we get into, this will lead into a discussion of our project. First of all, when we talk about web design, I guess there's two aspects of the design of a page. One is what I'll call the general design of the page or the site. Pretty much when I talk about this, I could either be talking about a web page or an entire website, because a website is just a collection of web pages. And then we're talking about the visual design. And these are two different things, all right? When we speak of the general design of the page, we're talking about, is the content good? Is it well organized? Is the navigation clear? So I'm talking about the general design, because this doesn't happen by accident, all right? Sites don't just appear well designed. It takes deliberate work to make sure that you have good content, that you understand your users, that you think about it and organize your content in the most logical way possible, in the best way possible, and that you make sure the navigation between the pages is clear. So that's what I'm talking about when I talk about the general design of a website. Now, the visual design of the website are all the things that you might expect to talk about web design. It's using appropriate color.
My husband's phone, we have the same. He needs a new charging port.
Okay.
Can you see how much that would be?
That you're using the appropriate colors.
It's
That you're
simple
using
text.
easy to
Yeah,
read
I'm putting it
fonts.
down. I don't know what it is.
Mhm.
That's better. Okay.
Yeah, just send it to me and I could see.
That stuff is not too crowded.
We were at Great Northern yesterday, and he just popped into the T-Mobile store,
Okay.
and that's what they thought it was.
I don't know who I'm getting some voices over the
Oh,
speaker. It's a little distracting.
I don't know if it's a Samsung or.
So if you
whatever.
pardon me for a second, I'm gonna wait till the voices die out.
Depending on the model, is like soldered directly to it.
I
or-
remember because I think Noah's, there's one of ours was like that, and it was like the whole thing was attached to it.
Yeah,
or like an
I guess they're not gonna die out anytime soon. These are the two things I'm talking about when I'm talking about the design of a page.
Okay.
That there's good content. In other words, the users can get what they came to the site for. That's what I mean when I'm saying that there's good content. And this can vary depending on the particular content that the particular site you're talking about. And all this relates to the goals of the user. All right. The content's good if it serves the goals of the user. So if you think of people visiting LC's website, some of their goals might be to find out what the tuition is. Some of the goals might be to find out what courses are required to get a degree in web development. What the library hours are. Who is a person that I can talk to if I have some career questions? Is there a place for me to apply for internships? All these things are reasons that someone might visit LC's webpage. All of these are goals of the users. Well, the content on the site is good if it serves the goals of the user. All right. And we'll find there's not just one user that visits the site. Each individual is a separate individual that visits a given website, but we can sort of categorize them together. All right. There are, for example, traditional students that have just graduated from high school and are coming to college. There are non-traditional students, students that maybe have been in the workforce for a while and go back to college. There are College Credit Plus students that are students that are still enrolled in high school. Parents of students that are members of the community. All these might have their own goals. And a website is going to try to accommodate as many of these goals as possible. But it's not enough just to have the content on the website. The user must be able to find the content. And what that relates to is the content being well organized and the navigation clear. All right. If, for example, the content is there, but it's very difficult to find, the website is not organized in a clear and logical manner, then that defeats the purpose of having good content. So that's the other thing that we want to achieve when we design our page as far as general design goes. Make sure the content is well organized and it is clear how to get to that content. And that's what we mean by clear navigation. I'm going to show you an example of a website that I think is very well designed. Let's talk about visual design first. Visual design first, the colors are contrasting enough. In other words, you don't have yellow text on a white background. All right. The colors complement the purpose of the site. That would be another example of using good colors on a website. I think I mentioned this before. A site for Barbie is going to look different than a site for a heavy metal band. They're going to use different color schemes and might use different fonts. Information is, I should say, not crowded. In other words, there's space between the stuff on the page. If stuff is too crowded, it's hard to pick out individual things. Finally, something that crosses over both general and visual design is a consistency. You have your website designed so that it looks consistent. So all the pages have the same sort of basic look. All right. Here's a website that I think is very good. It's well designed, in my opinion. And that is Google. Now, this is an elaborate design, quite the contrary. This is a very simple design. All right. But it allows you to get to what you need to get to. It helps you solve your goal. Most of the people going to Google are there to search for something. All right. Maybe I want to search about HTML. So when I come to the screen, it's obvious what I need to do. I just put in HTML in here and click either Google search or I'm feeling lucky. I'm feeling lucky will take you to the top search result. Google search will do a search and return many results. Notice the pages are consistent. They have the same color scheme. They have easy to read fonts. The colors are contrasting, so it's easy to read the text against the background. Most people come to Google to search. However, some people come to Google to check out their Gmail or do an image search. And then there's a whole bunch of other things that you can do when you visit Google's site, including Google Translate, Google Calendar, Google Drive, YouTube, and so on down the line, Google Maps. So this makes it very easy for the users to achieve their goals. All right. The content is well organized and the navigation is very clear. So I would characterize this as a well-designed site. This also has a good visual design. All right. The text is readable. The font is clear. The text is readable. It's not crowded at all. Stuff is not jammed together. Even if I do a web search when there's more content on the page. space between things. To help you tell exactly what you're looking for and separate things into groups. So these are all things that make this website well designed. You should keep all these things in mind, right? Your next lab, I think your lab that's due for next week, will involve you doing some research on the web and finding out what constitutes good web design and poor web design in more detail. So I'm not going to cover it completely in class. You know, that is part, I want you to discover some of these things on your own. And I want you to find some examples of what you consider good or well-designed websites or poorly designed websites. Let's look at a bad website, a poorly designed website. All right, 19 examples of bad website design. All right, I'm going to pick this one just off the top. It's not link. Let's go with something else. These are bad. I want to find one that's really bad, though. This looks pretty bad. Oh. I have to visit it for some reason. Interesting. Okay, this is listed as a bad website. If we look at it, what are some of the things wrong with it? Well, stuff doesn't seem to be very clearly organized on this page. Stuff seems sort of crowded on this web page. The navigation doesn't seem particularly clear of how to get around to different pages. It just in general looks sort of like a web design that you might have in the late 90s, for example. Oh, here's a classic. This is what I'm looking for. Wow, that's painful to look at. It really is. Because if you look at it, it's so crowded. There's no space between stuff. There's no breathing room on this page. The colors are used, but the colors don't really mean anything. Like, why is this link green and these links blue? Why is this link red? Really no rhyme or reason for why the colors are used. It's very, very, very cluttered. The navigation is not clear at all. It's not even clear when you first visit this page what the purpose of the website is. I mean, it looks like they're selling some kind of vehicles, but are they selling them? Are they renting them? Are they selling parts for them? You know, it's not really that clear. Okay, the one thing I said is that well-designed websites don't happen by accident. They're deliberately designed, they're deliberately created. And for your project this semester, you're going to develop a small website. And you're going to go through a specific process to design that website. And that's what we're going to look at the rest of today, is the process that you're going to go through to design the website. I hope all of you have already done this. If you haven't, make a point of doing this week, of going to the project section, project module on Canvas, and read through the project overview, the design instructions and rubrics, and the finished completed project instructions and rubric. We have 2 drop boxes. The design is due October 26th. So you have a little more than a month to get this done. I would suggest starting on it as quickly as possible. You're always welcome to send me what you have done so far, what you've thought about so far as what topic you want for your website. I am recording, good. I panicked thinking, I wonder if I started the recording, but I did. All right, let's look at the project overview. Small website, any topic you want. The idea is pick something that is fun, or if not fun, at least less painful for you than some other topic. Pick a hobby, pick a topic that you're interested in, pick something that deals with your career. If you have trouble thinking of a website, probably, feel free to ask me. The first questions I'll probably ask you are, what are your interests? What are your hobbies? Do you have any hobbies? What are you majoring in? And that'll help me to guide you into picking a good topic. The final web project should contain 6 to 8 pages, each containing a reasonable amount of content. What I mean by that is don't have 6 pages with each page having 1 sentence on it. That's not a reasonable amount of content. Your project should be technically sound. In other words, your HTML is correct. It follows all the rules that we've discussed in the class. That it's well designed. That it follows the good rules both for general design and visual design of a site. And finally, that it effectively communicates the intended message. Now, this is going to be done in 2 parts. The first part is to actually design the website. And you're going to come up with a document. This document is going to be, typically a Word document. You could have multiple Word documents if you want to break it down that way, or you could just have one Word document. Along with some sample HTML pages. Sample pages we're going to call the prototype. Think of a prototype as your rough draft of your website. It should look as close to the finished product as possible, but it doesn't need to be finished. Just like in English class, you might turn in a rough draft, that isn't perfect yet. You haven't corrected all the spelling or whatever. You haven't, you haven't thought through all your ideas. Maybe you haven't written the conclusion yet, or whatever.
HDMI.
Prototype for a website is going to be the same way for that. All right, it's not going to be.
I know we have USB-C to HDMI because that can be delivered over USB-C, but a standard USB cannot facilitate HDMI transmission, I don't believe.
Okay. Hopefully that'll quit. I wish I knew who that was so I could call them up and tell them to stop it.
Unfortunately, we do not.
All right.
USB-C would work, yeah.
Okay. Anyhow, let's see. Here's the instructions for the project. I'm going to download it and view it in Word. All right, there's 5 sections to your website. Strategy, scope, structure, wireframe, and prototype. Each of these get more and more specific. The strategy section is very general. The scope is a little more specific. A little more specific, a little more specific. Finally, we have some web pages. Prototype 4 pages. These will be in HTML and CSS. The other 4 steps are going to be in a Word document. The first section, the strategy section, is about the goals that you have for the site and that your users have for the site. So the strategy section, you define the goals. Now you're going to put yourself in the position of the person that's creating the site or the organization that's creating the site. So if you do a website about volleyball, for example, you have some goals. Maybe you want students to come to your volleyball camp in the summer. All right. Or maybe you want to sell athletic goods. You know, maybe you sell knee pads and socks and shoes and elbow pads and volleyballs. So maybe you want to sell more of those products or whatever. So you're going to define the site goals. You're going to make up sort of a fictional company or organization and come up with 3 site goals. You're then going to have the user goals. Now, user goals, as I mentioned before, not all users have the same goals, right? So therefore, you're going to create 3 fictional users. These are called personas. And you're going to make up characteristics about these personas. For example, if we were doing a website for the college, all right, you might say that John is a high school senior who is thinking about where to go to college next year. That might be one of your personas. Another persona might be Jacqueline, who is a parent of someone that is graduating high school this year. Another persona might be Alex, who is someone who is working a job that they don't like and they want to get some training in a particular field to, you know, get a better job. So you're going to declare these 3 personas. If you look out on the web, you can find examples of these personas. Just Google website personas. You'll find some sites that have information about it. All right, these are websites for a music publisher that sell sheet music. Persona 1 is a violin teacher. And persona 2 is an ad executive who is looking for music for their advertisements. Now they get very elaborate here. For this particular site, this site is a a online destination for color scheming and visualization to help you achieve your individual style. The first-time buyer. Even make a little sort of concept board for this person. Part-time mom, single mom. I'm going to find other examples of personas over here. Right. This is for a shoe store. And their first persona is Randy Tyler, who is a customer that has narrow feet. All right. And they have some descriptions of her. And most important, they have some goals for this person. You define these personas to identify the different goals. If you looked at a college's website and all you considered were high school students that were graduating and coming to college next year, you would miss the needs of a number of different other kinds of users. Because adult learners have different needs, have some different needs than high school students. Well, someone with narrow feet has different needs as far as shoe shopping than someone who has, you know, regular plain old medium width feet. Now, of course, you're not going to have a different persona for every possible combination. You're not going to have someone with narrow feet, wide feet, big feet, little feet, and so on. But this one persona represents people who have special size requirements, regardless of what they are. Because you're in the same boat almost if you have very narrow feet than if you have very big feet. You have a hard time finding shoes that fit. All right. So this one persona is represents really all the groups of people who have a hard time finding shoes that fit. All right. Now, you don't have to get as elaborate as this for your persona. For your personas, all you have to develop is what the persona is and what their goals are. Personas should be on a separate page and should contain an actual photo. This might sound a little corny, but the more that you can make your personas real for you, the more you can put yourself in their shoes, so to speak, and identify with them and sort of identify what their particular needs are. You know, maybe another persona would be parents that have a lot of kids, all right? And if you have a lot of kids, you know that they go through shoes fast, all right? But if you have a lot of kids, you might want shoes that are durable so that you can pass them on to the next kid, you know, after the first kid finishes wearing them. So there might be a whole set of goals that parents of a large family might have, all right? It's possible to develop personas for any topic that you think of. It's not just going to be one person accessing, one kind of person accessing your website. A lot of people like to do their project on video games. You know, they'll pick their favorite video game and they'll do a guide to it. And they might think, well, what's the personas there? You know, you just have people that want to play the video game. Well, you have people who have already bought the game and want some tips. You have people who are thinking of buying the game and want to know a little bit about it before they spend the money on it, you know, because video games are expensive these days. And finally, maybe you have parents that want to see if the game is appropriate for their kids. So even for a simple project, you can come up with several personas. And again, if you have a hard time thinking of personas, let me know. and I'll be glad to help you think that through. So in the strategy section, you'll have a brief description of your site, your 3 user personas with their goals, and your goals as far as creating the project. Now, the goals should relate to the actual content of the site, not to the design of the site. For example, some people put down as a goal the site should have good navigation. Of course the site should have good navigation. That's not a goal of a user. A user doesn't visit the site to look at the good navigation, all right? The user visits the site to get some content. So the parent who is going to see if the game is appropriate might want to know something about the language of the game. Or is there bad language in the game? Is there excessive violence? And so on. Not to say, oh boy, look, this navigation is really clear. All right. Now, that navigation will help the user find what they want, but the navigation itself is not a goal. So when you're done developing this section, you'll have in a Word document this stuff. Description of the site, your 3 personas with their goals, 4 goals. And it should be done in Word and look professional. Now, the scope is the actual content on the site that will help the users achieve their goals. For example, I was looking to buy a video game yesterday. All right, I bought the game called Untitled Goose Game. I don't know if you've ever seen that or not. I started playing it and it looks like it's fun. What are some things that help me make up my mind? Because I did look it up on the web because I don't want to waste money on a video game. I did look it up. What are some things that might help me decide if I would buy it, game or not? Any thoughts? Well, maybe how difficult the game is. All right. I personally don't like games that are really difficult. I just want to have fun. All right. I don't want to sit there and have to have the rules of the video game more complicated than the rules of my own life. All right. Which it seems a lot of the video games are. I don't necessarily have as good of hand-eye coordination as a younger person does. So I might want to see if it's difficult that way. I might want to see the price of the game. I probably want to see the price of the game because maybe I'll spend $20 for the game, but I might not spend $60 for the game, and so on. So the goal is I want to decide if the game is right for me. That's in the strategy section where you define the goals. The scope section has requirements, and the requirements are specific pieces of content that will help the user achieve their goals. So if my goal is to decide if I want to buy the game, one of the requirements might be display the price of the game on the website. Second one might be display the difficulty of the game on the website. Third goal might be post reviews that other people have of this. So maybe I can look and read through the reviews and decide, hey, here's a person similar to me and they really like the game, so maybe I'll like it as well, and so on. So the goals are what the user wants to achieve. The requirements are the pieces of content that the user will use in order to decide whether they want to whether to achieve their goal. In this particular case, whether they want to buy the game or not. Now, the goal for a parent is to decide if the game is appropriate for their kid. All right. What are some pieces of information that would help the parent decide that? Well, maybe a suggested age range. All right. Something saying the game is appropriate for kids 5 through 12, example, or maybe 12 through 12 and above, or something like that. Maybe a description of whether there is language or violence or other topics of an adult nature in the game. And if you're like most parents, the price, all right? There's going to be overlap between goals, right? Just like there's overlap between what a traditional student needs and what a non-traditional student needs as far as information about the courses. All right, there's going to be some overlap here. In other words, one requirement that you have on your website might actually help satisfy multiple goals. And each goal might have several requirements associated with that. But every requirement, every piece of content, when you hear the word requirement, think like a little piece of content. Every requirement should match up with at least one goal. Because if it doesn't, then why put it on your site? It's just going to clutter things. Every goal should at least have one requirement associated with it. Why is that? Well, if I decided this is an important thing for my website to achieve, then I better put something on the page that helps me achieve it. So there's a matchup between goals and requirements. This will simply be a list. How many of these should you have? My guess is 15 through 20 of them should be enough. That's just a rough number off the top of my head. It's possible you have a few more. It's possible that you won't have enough. Chances are, if you can't think of 15 requirements, maybe you pick too small of a topic. And if you have 40 requirements, maybe you pick too big of a content. Maybe too big of a topic. There's no need to define as requirement the basics of good web design, easy navigation, accessibility, and so on. You're going to assume that. So it's not a requirement to say I'm going to use an effective color scheme. All right, of course you're going to use an effective color scheme. That's not satisfying a particular goal. Right? That's just a general good guideline that you need to follow. And as always, if you're not clear about this, take a shot and send it to me. I'm always willing to read the rough drafts of your design document. It's best to make a bulleted list of these requirements. It's easier to read. I've seen some people write them up like in paragraphs. My website will have this, and then on it will also have this piece of information, and there should be a section of the site that allows me to do this and so on. All right. It's much better just to have a list that you can scan very easily instead of a paragraph that you have to really read through and figure out. Okay, so think bullet points here, where each bullet point is one little piece of content that's going to be on your website. The next section is the wireframe. Oh, no, I'm sorry, the structure. The structure chart is going to look like this. Sort of the logical way that your website's going to be organized. Let's think of the video game example. Maybe we're going to have our home page. All right. Then maybe we're going to have a page that has videos of the gameplay. Maybe we have a page about reviews. Maybe we have a page about parent guide to purchasing the game. And maybe we have a page of how to buy. It has links to Amazon or GameStop or whatever. I'm going to take all these requirements that I've listed and I'm going to decide what pages I'm going to put them on. Now, sometimes you'll make a separate page for the requirements. Other times you'll incorporate the requirements within a page. So maybe a general description of the page of the game. That would be a good idea to have. Maybe that's going to appear on the home page. Maybe one of your requirements is a general description of the game. That might not deserve its own page all by itself. Maybe you incorporate that into the home page. Well, maybe when I talk about having reviews about it, maybe I have a specific web page just for reviews. I guess what I'm trying to say is each requirement is not necessarily its own page. You piece together what requirements should be on which page. All right. A requirement of which platform you can play the game on. Is it Nintendo Switch? Is it PS4, PS5? Is it Xbox? Where do you think that would go? Well, I suppose you could make a page of itself for it, but I'd probably put that on the home page. Anyhow, that's what you're doing at this point. You're looking at the content of the site, you're looking at the requirements, and you're deciding how to organize it. Remember going back to our first slide that I drew up here, and I said that as far as general design goes, general design is about deciding what content to be on the website and how to organize it, right? Well, we develop the content when we create our goals and when we create our requirements. That's when we decide what content is going to be on the website. In this phase, we decide how to organize that, what we're going to put on what page. And we're going to have a diagram just like this. And you could put, as part of the diagram, what's going to be on this page, each page. And what's going to be on each page should be each requirement. So that is the structure section. So far, list of personas and goals, along with the description of the site, requirements, and the structure, all in a Word document. Next step we have is a wireframe. And what's a wireframe? A wireframe is sort of an outline of what each individual page is going to look like. So if we do a search for wireframe, here's an example. Right? Might be a little hard to see. Let's zoom in a little bit. There's a logo up here, home, about, contact, login button, and a sign up button. On each page, there'd be a product and a product description. I can't really read what that, I think that button just says button, which maybe there's a button to add it to your shopping cart. And then a headline and 3 little sections, and then a footer. Now this is very closely going to correspond to the main sections of the page that you have, that we've defined, right? If you think about it, when we've talked about our website and the tags that we use for the website, we've talked about the website having header, navigation, so many sections, and then a footer. A wireframe is just a diagram saying in general what it's going to look like, what the page is going to look like. You won't necessarily have a different wireframe for every page. You might, for example, have the home page have a certain layout, and then have each other page, every other page, have a slightly different layout. So you're not going to necessarily have a wireframe for every page. You might have a couple wireframes for your whole site. Or your pages might use wireframe A, another page might use wireframe B. This we're going to use later on, and in this course, later on means next week, all right? We're going to use this to develop some HTML and CSS. All right? Because we want a consistent page. We want the header to look pretty much the same on every page. We want the navigation to look different or the same on every page. We want the footer to look the same on every page. The sections of the page, the actual content of the page is probably going to be different on each page. So we're going to develop HTML and CSS that creates this structure. And then we're just going to clone that page over and over again. That way we're going to get a consistent website. Everything's going to be in the CSS file, so if we decide to change our color scheme, all we have to do is change it in the one place, and it will change it across the site. The last step in all of this is to come up with a prototype. And again, a prototype is a page that is not necessarily complete, but it is somewhat complete. So if I was doing a prototype, maybe I'd do a prototype of the home page. Maybe I wouldn't have the exact wording I wanted to use on the home page or the exact image, but I would sort of mock up an example web page for the home page. And then maybe I'd come up with a parent's guide page and design that. And maybe I'd come up with a third page. You're required in this example to have 3 pages in your prototype. Now keep in mind why we go through this whole trouble. Why don't we just sit down and start writing the code for our web pages? Why do we go through this design process? We do it for 2 main reasons. First of all, it's always good when you're undergoing a big task to plan it first. All right. And in like an English class, they might talk about like planning your term paper, like creating an outline, writing a rough draft, and so on. That process will allow you to do a better job than if you just sat down the last day before it was due and wrote a term paper. So this design document is good from a planning perspective. It allows you to get your thoughts together before you actually making the site. Because if you decide to change something, it's much easier to change a plan than to change the actual product once you've created it. All right? The other reason is to communicate to other people in the team. Maybe you're not the only web developer. Maybe you're working with a team of web developers on the site, if it was a very large site. Maybe you have a boss that you have to show ideas to, and they have to look at and approve. Maybe you have a customer that's going to be reviewing your work, all right? It's a good idea to be able to communicate to them before you're finished with the website and before you have everything complete, and show them the website. And what if they look and say, well, we hate everything about it, right? It's much easier to change the website when it's in the planning stages than when the site is complete. The further along that you go in a project, the harder it is to change it and to update it. Therefore, we're going to spend some time planning it and communicating that to everyone to make sure everyone's on the same page as far as what the website's going to look like before we go ahead and actually build the website. All right, our next several classes are going to be about this process, taking our wireframe and coming up with a prototype, coming up with HTML and CSS for our site. So we're not going to be interested just in a single page, but we're going to be interested in creating a multiple page website, a prototype for that. And that's what we'll pick up on next week. As always, review the other resources that I've posted. Review the project description. I've covered it the best I could in the time that I have, but it's up to you to read it and ask any questions you have about it. All right, that's all I had for today. Have a good week. We'll talk to you sometime next week.